And good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. This is session number 2 of Season 6, the Baron and Luthien season, as we return this evening after our first introductory session of a fortnight ago, and we return to the villains tonight. It is time to figure out what exactly Sauron was doing with himself, and even more puzzlingly, what does he go on to do with himself after he gets his butt kicked by an elf girl and her dog. So that, and not to mention the fact we have the even more tantalizing and mysterious question of what exactly happened to Thuringwethil. We need to do a full forensic examination to try to figure out Thuringwethil's cause of death, which is wholly mysterious in the text. Is she the only example of a character whom we are introduced to in Tolkien posthumously like that? Like we don't meet her until she's a corpse. I mean, there are people we only find out about, like, you know, historical figures that we only find out about afterwards, right? But like, is there any other example in Tolkien of like, let me introduce you to this character. She's lying dead right now. In fact, this is just her pelt, right? You know,
Theodred, probably.
Theodred, okay, Theodred.
Theodred was dead to begin with.
Yeah.
There
at
is
least he's courteously off screen. We don't get his we don't get his in the movie. You get his body. In the book, we don't get his body in the same way. So
there's probably at least one or two people mentioned from the Battle of Pelennor Fields who are mentioned posthumously.
Right.
I don't know for certain, but that seems like a place where that would happen, where he extols the various deeds of people who you've never
people that we've never met before. Sure, yeah, we definitely don't get introduced to all of those folks. Yeah, but anyway, it is time. It is time to solve the mystery of Thuringwethil, especially to give her, and of course, most importantly, to give her a fitting end to her storyline, because we have given her, of course, well, I think it's fair to say, an infinitely larger early storyline than she had in Tolkien's text, which was 0. So, anyway, that is what we are up to tonight. Welcome, everybody. And, of course, I'm joined this evening again by Marie Prosser and, the other guy. Nick Poazzo. I've not totally forgotten your name. I just had a moment. I'm like, yeah, it's me. It's me.
I'm so devastated.
Yeah.
Given one of the things that that really caught my attention when I first started listening to your podcast, when I first started commenting on things, is that you were one of the few people who pronounced my last name correctly on the first try without any hesitation. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that was probably luck on my part, but that's excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Anyway, so thank you guys for joining me again tonight. Just a couple quick announcements before we get going. I wanted to remind people about our space program, which is underway. We're actually in the penultimate week of our very first round of modules here in December, which has been we've had a wonderful participation. We've got 44 folks who are taking space modules with us this month. We have 7 confirmed modules that we're running in January, and I encourage you to look at those. Go to signumuniversity.org/space, and you will see the 7, including, we've got some really fun ones this time. You know, things like you can learn Old English, you can learn Latin, you can, if you already know Old English, you can be reading reading Old English together with folks to keep up your Old English. We've got one of the ones that I'm really excited about, a new module on Tolkien's invented languages. If you've always been curious to learn more about Tolkien's languages, right? If you're one of those Tolkien readers who is like, okay, like you don't like to confess to your Tolkien fan friends that you don't really know any Elvish at all, right? Like you can't make any sense of it. This is the perfect module for you, right? Because what James Tauber and Elise Trudel-Cedeno are teaching this together. And what they're going to be doing is they're going to be starting from the Lord of the Rings, right? So from looking at the pattern of Elvish word and name usage in the Lord of the Rings and helping you sort of construct Like what do we learn about how the Elvish languages work? So starting the process of beginning to, not just like starting it like it's a boring language class, right? Like let's just like memorize a whole bunch of paradigms and things about how Elvish works. Instead, it's really coming from the story and out of the story. How can we begin learning just from reading The Lord of the Rings about Tolkien's invented languages and how they're working and how he's deploying them? So that's what that module is going to be in January. It's going to be really cool. They're actually offering a follow-up module in February on Tolkien's writing systems. Tolkien's scripts and things. So anyway, there's lots of fun. We've also got another fun Tolkien module that's running in January, Tolkien's Ents and the Environment. So looking at sort of the question of environmentalism in Tolkien, especially focusing on his depiction of the Ents and sort of what that tells us about all this. So anyway, this and more. Our first anime module is running in January as well on some of the films of Miyazaki. So there's so much fun stuff that's happening in January. And we have announced we're offering even more awesome modules for February, which you can still select among and see what you're interested in, including really cool stuff like I already mentioned the Tolkien's Writing Systems module. We're offering a module on Babylon 5. Oh man, like it's going to be awesome. So encourage you to look into that. And registration for our spring classes at Signum in our grad program is now open. Thanks to Goldberry. Goldberry is what we have. So we have a brand new registration system. And of course, at most colleges, how like the software that they use for registration and stuff has a name. We named ours Goldberry, mostly because people who go to sign up for classes, as it were, knocking on the door of a woodman's cot, find the door opened by a fair young elf queen dressed in living flowers. That's kind of the experience that students at Signum have when they sign up for classes. So we're like, yeah, Goldberry. So anyway, Goldberry is awesome. It is this custom registration system that's been designed just for Signum, and it is just like the coolest thing ever. But anyway, you can now use Goldberry, get Goldberry's help in signing up for your spring classes. So definitely want to encourage folks to do that. We've got a really fun, if you're interested in auditing, we've got some 2 brand new courses we've never offered before for our linguistic folks, for our philologists. We have a course in Old Saxon. I think there are not a whole lot of other universities in the world that are offering a course in Old Saxon, I would just add. And of course, we also have a brand new lecture course on the Return of the King, the Return of King Arthur, looking at especially 20th century adaptations of King Arthur's story. Really, really awesome class. But anyway, all right, let us get back to Film stuff. So here we are in Beleriand as always. Murray, thank you as always for providing me the map so I can go back and stare at it and find new things that I've never really noticed before, as I am always want to do every time. Okay, so today we're talking about the villains, and we have to first of all kind of define what we're doing because I want it to be clear what's happening here tonight. In general, in the past, when we've talked about our villain storyline, we've been talking about the Angband storyline. We've been talking about Morgoth, or actually less often. Sometimes what Morgoth is up to, but more often we've been talking about like Gothmog and Sauron and Glaurung and figuring out, because they're the boots on the ground, when it comes to the villain storyline, as it were. Morgoth has been kind of behind the scenes for much of the time, except for his embarrassing altercation with the High King. But in this, I know one of the things that was under discussion on our discussion boards was this whole question about who counts as a villain? Basically, when we're thinking about villain storylines, who counts as a villain? I'm not going to count poor Dairon as a villain, nor even Thingol. What I want to focus, there are others who are going to be antagonists in various contexts, but most of the rest of them are going to be part of other storylines that we really want to think about and work out separately, right? Obviously, Celgorm and Curufin are villains, certainly when it comes to this season, but we're not going to talk about them separately. We're going to talk about them in the context of working out, the Nargothrond storyline all the way through. Similarly, Dairon and Thingol when we talk about the Doriath storyline and how that's going to work both at the beginning and end of the Baron and Luthien story. So there are only really 2.5 characters who really count as sort of these central villain figures in the storyline that we're going to focus on here tonight. Sauron, obviously. Thuringwethil, obviously. The half one is Bulldog, right? As Bulldog is relevant to this because we know this is indeed where the character of Bulldog comes from, right? I mean, the whole existence of Bulldog practically is the reference to him leading an attempted invasion into Doriath and being killed for it. In the Lay of Luthien, that's alluded to that happens at this time, though it's not described in much detail. We don't get too much about it. But anyway, so therefore, in as much as there is a, sort of conservative textual adaptation of Bulldog, he's supposed to die in battle, ideally with Thingol during this season. So what I'm counting as a half question as far as villains are concerned is what are we going to do with him? Not that that's not an interesting question in itself, but he's not a central villain one way or another. He's not a central villain in this storyline. So today we're going to focus primarily on Sauron and Thuringwethil. Now, Nathan on YouTube was asking, will Galadriel have an expanded role in this version of the Baron and Luthien story? It is very likely, yes. Expanded beyond what it is in the book? Yes. that we can promise, given that she's not in it at all. And we can't possibly avoid her. We've already set up her relationship with Luthien. So, like, the bare minimum, like the absolute minimum that Galadriel would be in this, she would have to come in at the end in Osirian, right? I mean, like, she would have to be involved somewhere in their retirement to we'd have to at least, like, run into her on the way to Osirian. Like, and I don't think we would have any desire to keep Galadriel and Luthien's stories apart. Now, exactly what role and how much of a role, that is yet to be determined. And that is, to me, actually a pretty interesting question. One of the things that we talked about with Galadriel was that, Nick, I think you were the one who was emphasizing last time that we don't want to, we moved her along a lot, her character development a lot in season 4, and we don't want to be too hasty with her. We need to pace ourselves with Galadriel. She has a long ways to go, and she needs to maybe have a downward turn so that things start to get a little more ominous, right?
Yeah, she needs to not have arrived quite yet, right?
Yeah.
The problem is going to be how to have her have any kind of a backslide with Celeborn at her side in a way that doesn't make Celeborn look wimpier than people already think he is.
I was going to say, because we would not want to make Celeborn look weak, man. I mean, that's clearly...
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So, and looks like JJ48 also had
concerns.
Similar concern.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But we
can't have Celeborn just flexing all over the place, and
right,
he's got to tone himself down.
I highly recommend that at some point we have a nice long discussion about Galadriel's future arc and how we're going to develop that. Yeah,
because we do need to take a long view on that and prepare how we're going to pace ourselves with that. Yeah. We're not going to talk about that now. That's not going to happen. I will say only one word. Eregion. I think Eregion is going to be one of the highlights, needs to be one of the highlights of Galadriel's subsequent career. For good and for ill. That's going to be one of the crises. But Hence, and of course, the real tragedy is we're not going to get a chance to do it before Amazon does, as I assume that's going to be happening in September. But
I can't even care about what they're doing. And like, I'll watch it, and it'll be good or not, and I have no say in what happens there, so I'm not going to feel bad about it.
That's true. Yeah. Anyway, okay, but this is me not talking about Galadriel anymore. So, because we're talking about Sauron, and there is enough to talk about, and I'm going to shift to that just before Marie can finish putting on her "I thought we were going to talk about Sauron" expression, which she was just starting to do. So, Sauron is our primary villain, not only this season, but in all of film, right? I mean, this is a huge deal. This is, just as I am implying Eregion is going to be a really key moment for Galadriel's entire arc, right? It's going to be a really important moment. This is a really important moment for Sauron, right? This is a pivotal occasion in Sauron's however many years this ends up being, in Sauron's like 25-year arc, from his conversion, to Melkor allegiance back in season 1, all the way to the fall of Barad-dûr at the end of season whatever it is when we get there. This is I'm not saying the crucial moment, but this is a turning point in his career, right? This is a big deal. And it's not only his defeat that's a big deal, right? I mean, that's one of the things that we're talking about, and I know that many people on the discussion boards were talking about. We don't want to just have this, like, Sauron is going along, business as usual, right? Like, things are, there he is minding his own business when all of a sudden he gets ambushed, by a girl and her dog. Like, that's not how it works, right? He has made a change. Like, when he sets up in Minas Tirith, as was, right? This is a new look for him. He is doing a different thing that he's never done before. He's putting himself out there in a way that he's never put himself out there before. He's been totally behind the scenes kind of villain to this point. We've seen him a lot, like we've emphasized a lot what he's done, but he has not really put himself. I mean, if we think about it, how many and to what extent, how many of the elves, of the good guys in our story, know who Sauron is and what he's doing? Some, right? Some.
Abeloth knows who he is.
Yeah, like I was just going to say. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
She's dead.
Angrod is tolerably familiar with him too, but again, now deceased. Again, presumably he would have told folks. That was the one contact, really? I mean,
No,
we
he
know
also is
that
the
he
one
was...
He's the one who captured Mydros.
Yeah, it's true.
Right. Okay, I forgot about that.
So,
I forgot about
yeah.
that.
But
Okay.
but you're making a very valid point that most of his interactions have been in obscure ways with very limited contact.
And
Not
very little
leading arms.
recognition. Exactly. I mean, like, so he was the one who was he was the guy who was trying to he was Captain Buzzkill at the Marathon before, right? But nobody knew that, right? Nobody really found out who it was who was doing that. And that's been true of a lot of things. Like, there have been a lot of things that he has done that other people have suffered from, but mostly they didn't know that it was him who was doing it or who was leading it. I mean, he was even responsible for the attack on Doriath that led to the girdle, right? The spider attack that we did. But nobody knew that. I mean, none of the good guys knew that, who he was, or that there was, they just knew there were a whole bunch of spiders attacking them, right? So again, the viewer will have been familiar with him, right? Familiar with his style, with what he's been trying to do, will know something about his conflict with Gothmog, and the very different approaches that he and Gothmog have taken, will have seen the conflict, indirect conflict even, between Morgoth and Sauron, right? Have seen Morgoth kind of, ride roughshod over Sauron on a couple occasions, most notably with the creation of the orcs, right? And then sort of the spell of bottomless dread stuff as well, right? What was the other moment we were recently talking about that we were paralleling to the orc moment? When Morgoth comes in and does something more like brutally than, wasn't there something?
The spell of bottomless dread is definitely a good example. I can't think off the top of my head of something else.
Maybe it's the spell of bottomless dread I was thinking of.
We did have Sauron make Grond, which Morgoth then used to not super overwhelmingly good effect.
Right.
The decision to have the Battle of Sudden Flame when it happened was Morgoth's decision.
Right.
Sauron would not have chosen that time.
Right.
Or, so as far as the heavy-handedness kind of thing, or springing plans before they're really fully ready.
Yeah.
Sauron has been in a position to sit back and be very critical of decisions that are being made over his head. If I were in charge, this would all be better, has been Sauron's motto for a really long time now. Like, that was how he views Gothmog, and then when Morgoth returned, he hasn't quite managed to say that very much, but that's how he feels about Morgoth. Yeah.
Morgoth's return, since Morgoth's return, Morgoth has been a disappointment to Sauron since his return from Valinor, right? I mean, that's fair to say, yes. Right? I mean, ever since the Orc incident, ever since he wrecked Sauron's, the whole Dark Elf experiment, now, ever since then, it's been, and he's been watching Morgoth disperse himself, right? Weaken himself in his attempts to dominate. And of course, the culmination of season 5, with the duel with Fingolfin, it was primarily Sauron. So, I mean, the ending note of season 5 was Sauron's doubt, uncertainty, hesitation, reservations about Morgoth's strategy and everything coming very much to the surface, right? Ending with a moment of Sauron staring down there saying, like, man, this is embarrassing, right? Like, this,
you can't
I'm not backing a winner
dude.
here. Yeah, exactly. Did I back a winner here at all? Right? Like, what am I doing? What am I doing here in this, ridiculousness? So, that's the note that we're following up on. That's where we ended season 5, and that's, I think, what we need to make sure we pick up on really importantly. So what Sauron is doing at the start of season 6 has to be in direct response to that, right? And it would seem to me it would have to be, to some extent, he would have to be saying, all right, I'm going to do it myself, right? That, like, Sauron is making a different, he's shifting. I'm not saying he's fully gone rogue, like he's rebelling against Morgoth full out, because he's too smart for that. I mean, he knows that even in his weakened, comparatively to himself, weakened state, Morgoth is still far, far more powerful than he is, right? So he's not going to defy Morgoth. He's not going to rebel. But this sense, I mean, does it seem to make sense that he begins in this place where he's saying, okay, I'm done playing with the team. I'm setting up I'm doing things myself in my own way, and I don't care. It's more or less something in that direction anyway.
Definitely the I can do this better.
Yes.
Feeling has been there.
Yes.
And now he's willing to do something about it.
Right.
He's been trying to run his own plan and then get frustrated when that plan gets co-opted by whatever the rest of Angband is up to. So now he's like, you know what? I'm just running the show.
Right.
And it's going to be the way I say it is because I'm not in Angband.
And he's tired of being Sauron. He's tired of being the abhorred one, right? He wants to reinvent himself as Thu, the necromancer, right? So one of the things that that he does is his activities in Dorthonion kind of, as I was just mentioning to Alana, kind of win him the right to act more on his own out there in Beleriand, right?
Okay. So let's talk about necromancy. Because on the one hand, obviously, it would be foolish for us not to do the necromancy thing, right? I mean, necromancy and Sauron, these are some closely wedded conceptions, right? We cannot even if we tried to run, we cannot hide from the necromancy. Sooner or later, the necromancy will out, right, when it comes to Sauron's character. So let's embrace this from the start and see where we are. Okay. Now, this was one of the things when we were doing the Morgoth's Ring discussion in the Mythgard Academy last year. This was one of my favorite parts, was when Tolkien, I mean, decades after he first wrote about Through the Necromancer, decades after he had a character called the Necromancer, which he retroactively decided was Sauron, though it was kind of inspired by Sauron's character in the first place, as in dark wizard living in a tower in spooky wood, just like the wood that Sauron flew to when he left Beren and Luthien. And, you know, so it's that they were joined from the beginning, right, in Tolkien's mind. And yet it doesn't seem like at any point at those times, like when he was writing the Lay of Luthien, when he was writing The Hobbit, or when he was writing even The Lord of the Rings, did he have any clear idea what necromancy was or how it worked? Like, that seemed to be one of the things that he was figuring out after the fact. Like, okay, necromancy, brainstorm, how does it work? How does it fit with the, metaphysics of Middle-earth? And short version, what he decided it was, is that when elves die, when their bodies die, their spirits, of course, remain in Arda. They don't leave Arda. And, of course, generally, they go to Mandos. The spirits go to Mandos when they die. So what Tolkien says is, all right, that's an elective process. It's only an invitation. It's a strong invitation, right? It's a very, very strong suggestion on the part of the Valar that the spirit of the dead elf retire to Mandos at that time, but it's not compelled, and that the spirits of the elves can remain in Middle-earth if they choose to. But if they do, it goes very badly. They tend themselves to become corrupted quickly. They become these shades haunting Middle-earth, and they end up falling into darkness, and their own wills becoming corrupt by the shadow. It is communication with, manipulation of, and domination of those spirits, the lingering spirits of dead elves who choose not to go back to Valinor, not to go to Mandos. That's what necromancy is. That's how it works. So this is what Tolkien decided. And again, this was a consequence of him working out more about how the Fea and the Hroa worked, right? How the spirit and the body work in elves in the first place. And then he was like, yeah, okay, like it's this holds together. That works. Necromancy means like magically gaining information from the spirits of the dead. Like, that's kind of what the word means. And so he fit the word, right, by having these dead elf spirits hovering around that could be manipulated and dominated. So If, and Nick, I agree, it is certainly very tempting to say that the necromancy angle, this is Sauron's gambit here. Like, this is what differentiates. You know, if Sauron has a new plan, that seems the most logical emphasis for his new plan, right? Almost every other plan that, I mean, he's also, of course, in his time there in Tol and Garhoth, associated with werewolves, right? But he's already done the werewolf thing, right? Like, the werewolf thing is not a new plan. That's just him continuing to do more of the old werewolf plan, or like doubling down on the werewolf plan. Or again, in the context of our story, as makes even more sense, Draugluin is one of his primary captains who's still left. Tevildo. The only reason it was called the Isle of the, the Isle of the Werewolves instead of the Isle of the Murder Cats is that Tevildo was already dead at this point, right? He's fresh out of Murder Cats, so he only has werewolves left. The inventory is diminishing, and so therefore it's all about the werewolves, right? Because that's the personnel he's got on hand.
And our backstory for Draugluin in some film is that Sauron gave him the form of the werewolf by pretty much torturing his spirit and forcing it into that form. So that was already a spirit realm manipulation step in the direction of necromancy. Like, the whole reason we had Sauron do it that way was so that it would lead to whatever else we wanted.
Right, to set up the necromancy thing. And exactly as Alana was just suggesting, it also is very consonant with his whole approach in his original orc project, right? I'm going to not just manhandle, right, these elves and the spirits of these elves. I'm going to seduce them. I'm going to corrupt them. I'm going to change them and bring them into alignment with. I'm going to dominate them, right? But well, not more gently, but in any case, not as crudely, right? He wanted the main what we said at the time was the main thing was he wanted to develop worshippers, right? And Morgoth just wanted slaves. He just wanted grunts. And Sauron that wasn't his vision, right? His vision was not the mere generation of grunts or the degeneration of them into violence-loving, murder-loving grunts, but rather these, sophisticated, still elvish, still even potentially like artistic and creative, but turned to evil, worshipping, Morgoth, and, who knows, maybe him as well. If, therefore, necromancy turns out to be this, I don't know, almost like a technological advance that Sauron makes, right? Wait a second. The old orc plan, it's not dead, right? I can revive that project, not in the old way, right? But there are all these elf spirits floating around. I can work with that, right? And I can try to bring about something similar to what I had before.
So I have a question.
Okay.
Could Gorelim and the Wraith of Gorelim be a part of like an early attempt to somehow intercept the souls of men after death? And of course, it doesn't work, so Gorelim escapes to warn Beren what's happened.
So
because one way or another, we have to decide whether human ghosts are a thing at this point.
Right. And I can't see that we can avoid that. I mean, there's way too much ghostliness in Tolkien down the road. I mean, we're going to have Oathbreakers eventually. So we need to...
But, I mean, like, we can kind of blame that on the curse of Isildur. Like, there's extenuating circumstances, but, like, Beren, nobody curses Gorelim.
Right.
I mean, we can have someone curse.
Yeah, but
we have candidates.
They would have to know what had happened. Like, ugh.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm just saying that there's only 2 people who aren't in the camp when the camp is suddenly attacked. And it's not going to take a genius to figure out which of the people who's not there is responsible for this happening.
Right.
So
yes,
some dying men could easily be cursing Gorelim in our first
such as
episode.
Bari here, right? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
if we
yeah.
wanted to do that.
If we wanted to go there. Yeah, so I agree with you, though, Nick, that we have to figure something. Like, we can't just have the ghost of Gorelim show up and because people, without any explanation at all. Because then people will be like, oh, so there are ghosts now. Were there ghosts before? Like, there's never been a ghost appearing, right? So, and I agree, it seems a little bit odd to have a spontaneous and unexplained ghost appearance in the very season when we're introducing necromancy and be like, yeah, this is a coincidence. Don't think about that. So, yeah we should think about that.
Not to mention, we kind of have to, like, we also can't introduce ghosts suddenly with the Oathbreaker. Like, that's another thing that we can't really...
Agreed.
Like,
Agreed.
Yeah, suddenly
and
these guys are...
Yeah. And again, what I was just saying is no argument against the ghost of Gorelim. I'm just I'm just saying we can't just be like we can't do it without explanation. There has to be some kind of context. Yeah.
To be fair, the Oathbreakers are kind of introduced in the text of the Lord of the Rings without any prior, like, there's no evidence prior to that ghosts were a thing. Well, I mean wraiths, I guess, but
they're different.
Or as you like to call them, tomb guys.
Yes, grave dudes. That's it. Yeah. Yes. JJ brings up the shade of Samuel in the Bible, who's also a shade who comes out of nowhere, by the way. Talk about your unexplained, like, the Witch of Endor could practically copyright that whole gig.
She used to work for Wicked, I hear.
Yeah. She's... and also the original trademark holder of Endor, who could sue both Tolkien and Lucas. So, I mean, really, she could have been a very, very wealthy sorceress indeed, had she had good legal representation. But anyway...
unfortunately, she was practicing legally, so...
Right, it's true. Yeah, I guess that disqualifies her trademark. Anyway, okay, so... we're wandering in very appropriate ways, semi-appropriate ways now, away from the question. So let us hold on to the general ghost question. Let us first finish answering the Sauron question. Sauron, we last left Sauron looking down with disapproval, disappointment, and disgust at Morgoth being humiliated and making embarrassing himself in his duel with Fingolfin, right? That was where we left Sauron.
He picks up the shards of Ringel in the very last moment that we see.
Sauron does.
Yes.
Sauron does, yeah. Okay. Right. So again, our very first responsibility at the beginning of the season is to show where does Sauron go from there. Like, what exactly does that gives him the impetus to do what exactly? And I think we're all sort of agreed that going out more on his own, at the very least, kind of taking his orbit a little further away from Morgoth, not flying off, right? Not open defiance, nothing like that. That's not his MO, right? But looking increasingly to feather his own nest, right? And he's decided he's going to set up on his own. So this brings me then to the necromancy thing. This is going to be a new innovation. No one's done the necromancy thing before. We've not even introduced the idea that there are the spirits of dead elves floating around, right? Now, by the way, what better time to introduce the concept of the spirit of dead elves floating around than right after a battle where we've seen thousands of elves slaughtered, right? There's going to be a rich harvest for necromancy in Beleriand just now, right? So, great. Okay. That would seem to provide the opportunity where Sauron suddenly does, and again, like, we can't have, this whole, like, Egon and Venkman at the beginning of Ghostbusters sequence where he finds out about the, the existence of elf spirits and stuff, but somehow we need to introduce the fact that he's we need to introduce necromancy, like that and this is a Sauron thing, right? This is going to become a Sauron signature thing. And other people aren't doing it. We have no evidence that Morgoth does the necromancy thing, right? This is a Sauron signature thing from here on out, right? But we not only have to introduce that and explain what does he do with it? Like, what does it get him? Like, what is it? I explained the kind of metaphysical context of it, right? But, what? So you're doing necromancy. What exactly are you up to? Are you gaining information? Is he coercing the spirits to do something? If so, what? Is he embodying them? Is he so first of all, like, what is necromancy? But secondly, and as we're answering that question, we need to make sure we're answering it in the context of how does this further his plan, right? And I would actually say one step even further back, what's the cause and what's the effect? Does his disappointment lead him, is that the cause? And his discovery of the, like, okay, I gotta go out on my own. So I need something. So I'm going to go figure out something, right? Some new angle, some way I can establish my own independent power, right? And then it turns out that necromancy is the thing, right? And there, he's like, Eureka, necromancy, that's it, right? Or is it the other way around, right? Is it like he's kind of simmering in disappointment and he doesn't know what to do, and then he discovers necromancy and he's like, hey, I've now discovered necromancy. Now I can set up on my own. So the discovery of necromancy is the cause of his now setting up on. Do you see what I mean about the cause and effect? Right?
So he needs either way, he needs a problem that is going to be solved by necromancy.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Which I'm not sure 100% that we have something like that.
We do. It's just it's not one that he's going to know he's going to need the use for, and that
right.
Is,
well, that's the problem is that we need to make that happen.
The Islandel situation.
Mm-hmm.
He needs a shade that he can coerce to hang out in that homestead and call to Gorelim, and it's not actual Islandel. So it's some dead elf that he's bewitched and put there or whatever. Like it's a necromancy thing.
Okay.
But
whatever's going on there is necromancy.
But does he need necromancy to have that same effect take place?
Total confession here. I was totally assuming we were going to have Thuringwethil in fancy dress with a little special effects to be the fake Islandel. I had like totally in my head kind of cast her in that role, right? As like, it seems, because I agree, you could, if you did have, dead elf spirits under your personal domination, you absolutely could recruit one to play the role of dead Islandel, right? But if the whole point is just to fake the dead wife, that's fakeable in multiple different ways, right? Whether through, again, somebody like Thuringwethil plus special effects, or even just through direct psychic manipulation of Gorelim himself, right? He could just be given a vision of that, which is just a fake and lying vision, right, from Sauron. So I agree that that's not exactly, although again, it could be a way in which if he had necromancy at his disposal, he could totally deploy it in that way. I agree that it doesn't necessarily qualify as a problem that requires necromancy to be solved. What about, hang on, I just had a fun idea, okay? And this is an idea that is so fun that it only has one problem, which is that it undermines a major storyline we've been building for several years. But apart from that, this is a great idea, and I know there's nothing I can say that'll make you guys love this better than that. So, Sauron shows up at Minas Tirith, with an army of the dead, and you right?
I'm on board.
You're tracking with me here, right?
Yeah.
Come on, right? Like the king of the dead comes to Minas Tirith, right, and conquers Minas Tirith with an army of the dead. I mean, that's a little bit sexy. Isn't that a little bit sexy? That actually shows up at Minas Tirith with the army of the dead, right? I mean...
Wait. Hang on. We don't have to abandon the other thing. Hang on.
No, we don't have to abandon the other thing. Yeah.
Wait. Watch this. Watch this.
Okay.
You know how you have to open the window, right? How Anael is programmed to open windows wherever he goes?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Right? So that the vampire has permission to come in.
The invitation,
right?
yeah.
Right? Anael, we just have to engineer Anael to get to Minas Tirith on whatever excuse we have to come up with. Can't be that hard.
Yeah.
And he opens. Because there is some sort of a metaphysical boundary that's created.
Right. We do the threshold thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So he creates the opportunity for the dead to come in.
He allows them through the threshold.
Yeah. And so, this, of course, like among the things that I've always disliked about the Peter Jackson, the dead sweeping away the Battle of Pelennor Field at the end, there are a number of things that I dislike about that. But among those things has always been the fact that he depicts this purely incorporeal, okay, well, not in the Jackson movie, technically not purely incorporeal, but this incorporeal force just like swarming upon and like apparently manhandling folks on the battlefield, right? That is, Peter Jackson in the film deploys a completely incorporeal and spiritual force in a disappointingly physical, incorporeal way, it seems to me, right? And
he reduced the ghost to scrubbing bubbles. Yeah. Now that's another
of the things, like the visual that went along with that made them look like scrubbing bubbles. But of course, when the dead win the Battle of Pelargir, they win the Battle of Pelargir by terror, right? Just by, like, it is, in fact, the intangible, incorporeal impact of that army coming in that wins the battle at Pelargir. And so, Nick, I kind of like the idea that, again, Sauron does not... If Sauron comes in as the king of the dead, and by the way, like, that's got to happen, right? King of the dead, come on. He's got to... Can we have Sauron,
I'm Sauron, Lord of the Dead?
Sauron at some point call himself the king of the dead, right? Or somebody call him the king of the dead, right? I mean, like, Sauron comes into the room and someone, or like, walks out onto the battlefield and someone's like, the king of the dead approaches. Like, God, that's just too, like, we have to do that. Anyway, we'll work on it. The time will come. But anyway, the point is, Nick, I do like the idea that when he, as King of the Dead, comes to Minas Tirith with an army of the dead, it's not just a matter of like, and now my undead and semi-corporeal minions swarm the castle and destroy everybody and then I'll walk in. Like, that's not how it should work, right? If there is, they can't do anything, or they can't do anything until something happens, and then Anael would make that thing happen, right? Whether it's as simple as actually welcoming them in and inviting them in, or whether it's something else or something more than that. I'm not sure, but yeah.
So I have a few questions, though. How easy is it for Sauron to do this? Because in order for him to have an army of the dead, he needs to have done it a lot. And we need this to happen pretty early in the season. So he's got to make with the necromancy on it. He's got to get the necromantic assembly line running, right? So that if he's going to have an army of the dead. Okay. All right. So hang on. This is not a solution to that problem, but if he, we were looking for a problem that can be solved by necromancy. The taking of
Minas Tirith can be the problem solved by necromancy, right? I mean, so especially if Sauron, we've shown him looking down his nose at orc armies to this point, right? He's not into the orc armies. He's got werewolves, right? So that's something, and that's useful, and he will deploy his werewolves there. But he needs more, right?
Okay.
And he doesn't want to rely on the others. This is part of his going independent, right? He just doesn't want an orc army. Yeah.
How on the nose? Would it be too on the nose for him to be collecting the corpses of elves from the battle in a ginormous cauldron? It doesn't even have to be a cauldron necessarily, but something like just
some other
some
form
sort
of crockery,
container.
right?
Well,
some vessel or other.
Even if it's like a pit, like just kind of
Right.
symbolically, because the cauldron goes back way before Lloyd Alexander. Like that's a super old.
Sure, an old
thing.
Celtic idea. Yeah.
I mean, that's where the holy. I'm pretty sure the Holy Grail actually comes from the old cauldron myth.
There's certainly some similarities.
The Arthurian legend of the Grail, and like to at least pay homage to that, I think would be kind of neat.
Yeah.
Because what you are in, I mean, we're not describing Cauldron-born necessarily, because Cauldron-born are physical,
right? They're corporeal. Yeah.
Invincible warriors, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he puts
Yeah.
on such shows.
Yeah. Okay. So
with necromancy, you don't need the body.
nope. Body's totally optional. In fact, body's a requisite to be absent. Really.
But Sauron is going to put his own spirit in a ring at some point. So if he is finding some way to physically tie spirits to the world through inanimate objects, whether or not they're cauldrons, that might be within the realm of things we can use.
Okay, so hang on. So yeah, this would make the Rings of Power a later generation of technological development, right? Where first all he was able to do was enslave other spirits and tie them to physical objects, but then he figures out a way to have to like bind the spirits of living things, like the Nazgul, right? He gives them the rings, which ensnare them and ensnare their spirits, and keep, so that from the Nazgul to Bilbo's butter and bread, right? We have his enslavement of the spirit, even for mortals, right? And now that's like a couple generations. Technology generations right down the road for Sauron. It's interesting. I mean, to make his necromancy explicitly a kind of exactly, JJ, a kind of alpha build of the Rings of Power is a really fascinating idea, because it's one of the things that it's one of the dots that never gets explicitly connected in Tolkien, right? Like the necromancer becomes like, it wasn't just a disguise, right? It wasn't just a pseudonym, right? It wasn't just his his screen name or something like that, right? I mean, it was like he was like, so what do those two things have to do with each other? Like, what is the connection between Sauron, Mr. Ring of Power, and ring wraiths and everything else, and his necromancy? So if we begin sort of establishing that link from the beginning, I really like that. Now, hang on a second. I wanted to address Angel Eyes, I think. Yes. Was asking about the orcs who kill Barahir and his band. Hang on. One problem at a time, man. We're trying... First, I totally get that and everything. And I have some thoughts about that. But I'm going to so first I want to focus on Minas Tirith, right? Well, no. First we're trying to focus on necromancy. And Minas Tirith seems like, especially since the Thu, Necromancer, Minas Tirith, it's all tied together, right? Because then it seems to me that the question of how Sauron gets involved with... Because that has to happen first. Before... Like, Beren is not kicked out of Dorthonion until after Sauron is established in Tol and Garhoth. Right, so we need to work it. So because other factors could potentially intervene between the one and the other. So we don't have to necessarily solve all those at once. So we start with my basic question is just the opening gambit from Sauron. Right, again, we saw where he was at the end of season 5. Where does he go from that? What does he do? Answer. He takes Minas Tirith and he develops necromancy. So first we do that. Then we figure out, having established necromancy and having conquered Minas, Sauron, you've developed necromancy and conquered Minas Tirith. What are you going to do next? And his answer is, for some reason, drive the remnant of the House of Barahir out of Dorthonion. And that's the next question. But it's still the next question. We're not there yet.
Question for you.
Okay.
Is there any particular reason the spirit of, say, Aignar would maybe stick around Dorthonion because of, reasons?
Reasons, yeah. You're suggesting to me that there might be a reason that Aignar might want to stick around in Middle-earth? That's what you're suggesting? Yeah.
There might be. And,
that we might have an elf who might have some motivations to stick around? Yeah.
Yeah, and therefore would be susceptible to being ensnared.
For some reason... Though oddly, in retrospect, it literally never occurred to me to have a named elf be subject to the necromancy, right? But we do have some candidates.
Angrod is also a possibility, but that just seems cruel.
Angrod's been through enough. Aignor's been through a bit too, but okay, to be fair, none of our dead elves are free of suffering in the time leading up to their deaths. But there
are some logistics questions that we should kind of work out real quick, because, does this necromancy start immediately after the battle? How long does Sauron have to get in there and get these spirits before they move on? Or is it just that there are so many spirits of the Noldor specifically who are super nervous about going back to Mandos? And if that's the case, now we have to, that kind of has to be made more or less explicit.
Yes.
In the world that we have created thus far.
Yeah. Okay. So the answer to the first question. Timeline purposes. How much time do we have? How much time do we have between the Dagor Bragollach and the the arrival of Beren and Doriath?
About 5 years.
5 years? It gives us some time.
More importantly, he probably has to be at least on his way there by the second episode of the season. Yeah. We can't. And that's the timeline that we have to kind of pay attention to. Because the amount of actual time is kind of fluid, and it's going to depend on what the viewer is willing to accept.
Right. Because you're right. We basically have to we cannot spend more than one episode. Minas Tirith has to fall in the first episode.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Right?
First or second, but yeah.
First or second. Because if the second... we've got to. We got stuff to do. We've got to get to Gorelim and we need to have Beren holding the dismembered hand of his father by the end of the second episode, don't we? I think we have to.
At the latest.
At the latest. And then, because that would still leave us until episode 3 to have him dodging spiders and showing up non-creepily falling in love with Luthien, right? So I mean, we can't delay things much more than that because we have too many other things to do in this season. So yeah, we're looking at one episode essentially. Like when we're thinking about this opening issue with Sauron, the discovery of necromancy, the plan to attack Minas Tirith, the betrayal of Minas Tirith and its fall, and Sauron establishing himself and calling himself the King of the Dead and through the necromancer, that's got to happen. We're talking one episode essentially.
Well, it's worse than that because Sauron is not the ultimate enemy of the season.
Right.
Like, so we can't have the whole first episode be just about Sauron. Right? We've got to be setting everything else in motion.
Well, does the Gorelim stuff have to wait until after the fall of Minas Tirith?
I don't think
not necessarily.
Right, so I feel like the conquest of Darthonian and the fall of Minas Tirith are, I mean, they're both things Sauron's doing, but
yeah, maybe so. Maybe that's the sequence I was thinking of when I wasn't thinking then of episode sequence. I was thinking of just chronology, right? That he would establish himself and then that would happen. But yeah, maybe we don't do that because. By the way, and here I am like wandering off into episode outline, but I'm thinking the fall of Sauron and the destruction of Tol and Garhoth is basically the midpoint, turning point of the season, right?
Yeah, I was thinking like an episode 8-ish.
Which then does, I mean, it
9,
makes...
Yeah.
I see what you mean about like if the whole first episode is just Sauron, it makes it seem like overcoming Sauron, and then like the one that we spend the whole time at the very beginning of the season, setting up is gone by halfway through the season, and so the end of the season is not going to connect to the beginning quite so clearly. On the one hand, I see that, but on the other hand, I'm not quite sure how to avoid it because I don't want to take time away from Sauron. Sauron is our main character. He's the main character of the entire show, right? So and this is so important. We can't short sell Sauron in this season.
And typically you would save the main event for the end of the season, but we killed Fëanor in the middle of the season. And he was a kind of important character for a while.
Right.
And I'm not saying
but we were really signaling something there, and Fingolfin was in episode 1, like he figured in episode 1 of season 2 as well. I know. Like his plot arc continues, and you can see the plot arc of the Sons of Fëanor continue as well. So
I have the solution. Ilana gave the solution. The answer is who is the primary villain of this season? It's not even Morgoth. Morgoth has a role, but it's a bit role in this story. And it's not Karkaroth either, right? I mean, he may be literally the big bad in this season, right? He is and he's the one with the climactic battle at the end. But that's not the story here. It's not that kind of a season, right? The climax of this season, what we're building up to, right? The money bit at the end of season 6 is the song before Mandos, right? And the return, the release from bondage, and the return from death. So, just as Ilana is suggesting, what we need to set up in episode 1 is the Mandos issue. And the going before the halls of Mandos and going before Mandos. And if we do have spirits of dead Noldor who are not quite sure about returning to Valinor, and I mean, look, when they last saw Mandos, it was a bad day, right? I mean, it was he was scary the last time they saw him. So now they're getting a cordial invitation to go dwell for an indeterminate amount of time in his place. And this is going to be a dubious time. It's going to be an uncertainty, right?
Steve, Mandos, we're not saying that Mandos is a villain But this is similar to what we wound up doing with the story arc of season 4, where season 4, the true antagonistic force of season 4 was the strife between the various groups of the Eldar, and that strife has a certain level of resolution in episode 13, right?
The wedding of Galadriel is the really important thing, right? Yeah.
Right, and the reconciliation of even the sons of Feanor and the sons of Fingolfin in the combat with Glauron.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's more akin to that, where the idea of death itself is the antagonistic force.
Exactly.
The oppression that is felt by us because of death.
The theme of the season is escape from bondage, right? Deliverance from bondage. And that's got to be the question that we open at the beginning. The Noldor, what are they going to? Hello, bunch of Noldor who were just slain in the Dagor Bragollach. What happens now? Your Fea has been separated. Your Hroa is out of commission, and there is your Fea there in Beleriand, right, looking about itself and wondering what to do. You receive a strong and peremptory invitation to go to Mandos, to go to the halls of that guy who cursed you, which you remember very well, right? What does this mean? Is this the beginning? Is this day one of your prison sentence, right? Are you, if you go into the West, are you going into incarceration and probable punishment? Right? Is this the chickens coming home to roost to you now? I mean, these have to be the questions that the Noldor are asking at them. They don't know. They don't know what's going to be happening. So some of them stay, right? Some of them choose to stay, which is a bad call. Tolkien is very clear on the fact that it is a bad call to refuse the summons of Mandos. But by introducing this in the opening episode, we do successfully open the very questions that we want to be closing at the end. Well, closing is an ambitious word, perhaps, but we're going to be, this is the theme we're going to be dealing with. And this is what we're going to be focused on resolving at the end of the story with Luthien and Mandos there. Right. And that, of course, and by that, I mean the uncertainty, right? The lingering, at least, the hesitancy, even perhaps, of the Noldor at the beginning is the perfect setup for Sauron. This is where he sees his opportunity, right? Because Sauron perceives this. Sauron perceives this happening and says, "This is my opportunity." Now, I wanted to bring up what Nathan on YouTube was saying a little while back. Yeah, because I thought this was really smart. Nathan says, Sauron's problem is Morgoth seems to be spiritually lessening and dispersing in essence, right? He sees this, and he's like, this from the outside. He's watching this, and he's like, this is bad news, right? The boss man is heading down this street from which he's not going to be able to return, right? I'm seeing the toll that it's taking on him. This is not right. So he logically is going to be asking himself, how can I avoid this fate? How can I improve on this model, right? His model, right? Morgoth's model. Morgoth's model is, I have so much power, right? It's all about me, right? And so therefore there's enough of me to go around. I'm going to disperse myself in order to dominate Arda, all of Arda, if I possibly can, right? And he presumably thinks he's succeeding, thinks it's working out, right? But Sauron looking on is like, no way, man, right? This is not succeeding like you think it is. I can see the problem here. So Nathan's suggestion is, perceiving this, Sauron then says, let me start experimenting, not by dispersing my spirit to others, but enslaving other spirits to me. Right? I'm gonna not decrease myself. I'm gonna increase myself, right? By drawing power from all of these others, right? And bringing them into my own domination. So he has the two. So he has both a concern, right? He has the concern, which is I see how the boss is going downhill, and I don't want this to happen to me. And P.S. I want to start introducing some discrete distance between me and him so that I don't get caught in the blast radius when he goes down, right? Because it's not looking good, right? In one way or another, he's going downhill. But he also sees an opportunity, right? When he's like, hey, look at this. There are all these elf spirits hanging about here now, right? This is a natural resource that should be tapped, right? This is my key. And then of course we have his desire to separate, right? And so those three things come together. Operation Necromancy, right?
So we could open up, and we can work out more details later, but we can open up even with a scene of Mandos confronting some of the dead, right, as they come in, but also then move from there to Sauron observing some of these spirits, because presumably he walks in the spirit world as well as in the manifest, right? And he
right.
must be aware of them.
Yes.
And maybe he can he can kind of force one to tell him this information that we're creating here.
Necromancy.
That why
information from the dead. Yeah.
Like why are you here? You know.
Right.
Because he knows about Mandos.
Yes.
He knows all about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He knows that Morgoth was stuck there for the longest time, right?
Yeah.
He was there when it was built, right? Although not actually in our story. In our story, they come across Mandos fully set up and ready to go. That's right.
Okay.
But he's aware of what's going on there, so he forces this elf wraith to give up the information of what they're doing there, and light bulb. He's able to use that information to his benefit.
Yeah.
At some
go ahead.
point, we will have to decide how much of Mandos we want to show and when. The halls of Mandos, I mean. And obviously, we're going to put Luthien there, so we're going to see it.
We're going to see it. Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah.
Right.
So in the beginning here, somehow hinting at it without showing it's probably better. But
yes,
explaining the invitation and the refusal of the invitation would be the key step.
Yeah. So what happens if somebody refuses the invitation? Do they just get immediately ported back to where they fell? I mean,
no, I think it's the other way around. Like they are where they fell, and they get ported if they accept the invitation.
Right. So does Mandos appear to our viewers?
How does the invitation work?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Like, does he appear like the Grim Reaper at the point of death?
I think that could be a cool opening scene to have
it could.
the battlefield.
It would be super cool. I just don't know.
And you have like a
we
spirit
want to say
world
that happens.
version of the battlefield.
Does Mandos do this in person? Does he have emissaries? Is it just a voice? Is it just music?
We haven't shown any. That's the problem.
Yeah.
If we had had the foresight to come up with this before.
What did we do with the Curse of the Noldor? Did we have him on a hilltop? He physically showed up?
Yeah.
Okay.
We saw him.
We did see him then.
Possibly just like the upper half of his body because he's so enormous, right?
Right.
Like over the top of a hill.
No, I mean, we've met Nama before.
Yes.
The question is, it's been a while. We would have to show him personally. If we had an emissary, even if the emissary says, I am here on behalf of Mandos.
I'm here on behalf of that guy you've not even heard of in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, it's
since
right.
the middle of
So-
season 3.
It's less
yeah.
powerful.
So if
Yeah.
we're doing a spirit world thing, having Mandos appear as if he's there, like, it's a spirit. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't you have spirit stuff going on where you don't have to physically be there to appear?
Right. Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
It's a vision.
Yeah. Right.
Why do we
Right.
solve everything in film with visions?
Come on, it's awful.
Yeah,
Andy.
but this time it's a
not
vision
the
for
same
us.
kind of. It's not the same kind of vision, right? Exactly. It's.
Otherwise,
yeah.
I'd be sitting here going,
Right. Wait, Nick, I have an idea. If we have somebody have a dream, it solves all the problems, right? Never mind. Okay, so yeah, no, I love this. Okay, so I'm not thinking in terms of like, so this is not me like trying to outline an episode 1 or anything. I'm just thinking through kind of the sequence here, right? We begin with spirits of the Noldor being summoned to Mandos, some going and some staying, right? In trepidation and uncertainty, possibly even named folks, a named person or two, because we've got multiple dead named folks that we can work with now. And okay, sorry, let me digress for a moment to say, if we're going to do this, if we're going to show, like, here's the spiritual side of what was going on at that corpse-strewn battlefield, we have an opportunity to dispose of the spirits of men and show how that works. Like, if we want to establish the metaphysics of what happens to the spirits of men after they die, what they do or don't do and under what circumstances, we could, I mean, we have plenty of dead humans as well, is what I'm saying, that we can work with here. If we want to establish some kind of either norm from which Gorelim is deviating, or, you know, I don't know, some kind of setup of dead Gorelim.
Did Tolkien, I know he weighed in on how this works for elves, but did he weigh in on how much of a choice we have
Humans?
in the moment of death? Yeah.
To leave the world, none, I think. I mean, like, because
we just go.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in essence, actually, it's kind of similar. Well, no. It's
You go to Mandos first, and then you leave.
Yeah, no, I know that.
right.
Yeah.
Right. But, like, the point is, elf spirits, they're sticking around in Arda one way or the other, right?
Right.
Like, they don't leave. The only question is how they're gonna pass their time, right? The rest of the life of Arda while they're here, either in Mandos or not in Mandos, and if not, that's not going to go well, right? Humans also, like, so all elves stay in Arda. All humans leave Arda, right? Human spirits leave Arda. Almost footnote Oathbreakers, but later. In general, right? That's what happens with men. And now, like the elves who are all staying in Arda, some of them do this and some of them do that. There can be multiple destinations, right, for the spirits of men after they depart from Arda. But that, you know, that doesn't change the question that's the somewhere out of Arda is the destination for all human spirits. They're all going, the elves know not whither so many places that happens to be, right? So if we're talking about heaven and hell or whatever we're talking about, it is somewhere else that is not Arda, and all of them are headed there. And for the purpose of our story, that's what matters, right? That it's beyond the circles of Arda. After the waiting time in Mandos, which, by the way, always makes me uncomfortable. Like, it makes me uncomfortable because it's Tolkien was super conservative. Like, we were just talking about this last night in the Nature Middle Earth discussion about, what I joke about the drawer that Tolkien has. Like, whenever he cuts anything, like a name, a character, a sentence from his work, I always joke that he has a drawer that whenever he cuts it, he puts it in the drawer, right? Because he might take it out again later on. Like, he never throws anything away. This is true of ideas too, like ideas which he seems to have totally removed, like linger in the background, and sometimes it seems like they've never actually died. That's what it feels like to me. Like when he sat down and did his mythology in the Book of Lost Tales, like when the very first conception of this, it was perfectly clear that it was a mythology of heaven, hell, and purgatory, right? Where Angband was hell, right? The Iron Hell is what it is. So you had, Valinor, which was heaven, paradise, and you had Angband, which was hell, and then you had the halls of Mandos, which were purgatory, right? And it mapped directly onto heaven, hell, and purgatory originally. He left that pretty quickly. In drafts of the Book of Lost Tales itself, it's not even something he abandoned after that. During writing, it was only in the very, very initial stuff in the Book of Lost Tales that you can see that, and then he pulls back from it almost right away. And yet, it's still there, right? The Halls of Mandos as purgatory is still there with the Halls of Waiting set aside for men, right? Which might as well be Niggle's workhouse, right? It's there it is, right? And it makes me uncomfortable because what I mean by my discomfort here is that it's like a halfway thing. Is the human destiny beyond the circles of the world or not, right? And to say that purgatory is within the circles of the world and then you leave the circles of the world to go to heaven or hell, it just seems to me like a halfway measure, a kind of confusing halfway measure, right? But having said that, having ranted and complained about that, it's a halfway measure that we can use because it's a halfway measure that we can use because we need to explain ghosts anyway, right? And why there are humans who... So if, that is to say, Oathbreakers are easier to explain if their spirits would probably have still been in Arda anyway. They're just, in the paths of the dead instead of Mandos, right? Not yet having gone to wherever it is they're going to eventually go, right? And
the other reason we need the Halls of Waiting in Mandos for human souls is that we need Baron to go there and wait for Luthien.
Right. But
so
see,
if he was going to just leave the circles of the world and be gone, she wouldn't be able to catch up with him.
See, okay, but that's actually one of the things I dislike about it too. She tells him to wait for her, right? She tells him to wait for her. And my preferred, my kind of headcanon of that story is that her words to him have an effect. An Isildur-esque effect, right? That if all humans are hanging out in Mandos after they're dead, and then he's like, oh yeah, do we have a dude named Baron? Then him being there waiting is not special, right? But if humans normally just go, and instead Mandos and others are like, hey, who invited the human? Why is he here, right? And then someone's like, oh, right, Luthien. If it's Luthien's fault, basically, that he's there. If it's the link between them. If her, again, like Isildur cursed the Oathbreakers and it worked, right? And it had an impact on their, afterlife in some sense, right? So I think, I like the idea that Luthien's, when she tells Baron to wait for her and he, promises that he will, right? That their mutual promise to each other that her asking him to wait and his agreeing that he would affects it, so that everyone's like, why is this guy still here? Instead of just being like, somebody go find Baron out of the crowd because, he's being called to the principal's office.
So it sounds like what bothers you is a hall of waiting for men in the Halls of Mandos.
Yes.
But if there were just a doorway through which one could leave Arda in the Halls of Mandos that men passed through, and there was no, waiting at a bus stop aspect to this, that would probably fix a lot of that for you. It
sure.
Sounds like.
Yeah, that would. That would.
And so if Baron stands there and doesn't go through the doorway.
Yes.
Because he's waiting.
Because he's waiting. Yeah.
Then that makes him unusual.
The
And
unusualness
yet-
feels like it should be unusual. Like he should be
but
in an
it
unusual
doesn't
state.
change the fate of where men go or anything. It just, all we've
Right.
eliminated is the waiting period, which I realize is a large chunk of the purgatorial aspect.
The waiting period. Yeah, exactly.
Unless humans go to like a more spiritual version of purgatory than the elves do. You know,
On the
like
other
well,
side
I
of the
mean,
door.
on the
their
other
whole
side of
set
the
of-
door.
right, on the other side of the door. Right.
The whole
They
Yeah.
still
waiting-
have to go to
Yeah.
purgatory.
Exactly. I don't want anyone to think that I'm arguing against purgatory. I mean, I could argue against purgatory, but that's a completely different discussion. I wouldn't argue against it with Tolkien anyway. So yeah, no. It's just to say that purgatory, that even purgatory should be within Arda, feels to me just metaphysically inconsistent with the rest of the world that Tolkien has created, and it feels like something that's just lingered from the days. I mean, he got rid of he took heaven and hell out of Arda, right? But he never committed.
Demythologized them.
He never committed to taking purgatory out of Arda, and that's the thing that does kind of bother me. So yes, a portal. I like a portal, right? A portal is a nice way of kind of visualizing that, right? I mean,
They
because
have one on the other side because they kick Morgoth out through it.
right, we have more than one portal. We already have a different, right? So we've got the eastbound and the westbound portals. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so you
And
guys go to
the
like
east-
northbound
so-
and southbound trains, right? Yeah.
Aya resides in between the timeless halls and the void.
So we've got so right, we got like Arda as at the crossroads, right? Of
Well, not Arda, but
Arda.
Aya itself,
Aya
like
itself,
the
right, yeah.
the manifest universe, in a way, kind of spans the gap between the void itself and the timeless halls, and so the exit from Mandos takes you to the timeless halls. The
Yep.
other exit sends you to the bad place.
yeah, exactly. Where presumably Morgoth is gnashing his teeth and potentially weeping or wailing. Yes, agreed. No, I agree. We have a portal. That's a thing. I mean, that's a genuine element of Tolkien's mythology, that kind of portal. And the other thing is that we have to, the Doors of Night. And the other thing we have to remember is this would also be, I think, perhaps a good way. All this metaphysics. I mean, let's face it, there are very few ways to convey that. I mean, it's not like we can convey any of this in exposition, right? I mean, that's not possible to do unhorribly, right? So
it would just be stuff that we just see kind of existing. Like when we see Baron waiting, there's the door of shall we say, morning.
The door
right?
of morning, or Ooh, fun pun there. But okay, so showing a physical portal, we do need to somehow convey. I mean, it is crucial. We can't get through season 6 without somehow conveying to our viewers, including those who don't know the first thing about the metaphysics of Middle-earth, right? That the spirits of the elves go to one place and the spirits of humans go somewhere else, right? So having the mysterious to elves portal, right? Even mysterious to the Valar, they don't even necessarily know what's on the other side of that portal, right? Because they don't know Iluvatar's plan for humans and for the gift of Iluvatar, right? This is presumably something that is in the music after the vision stopped. Well, after the vision stopped.
Luthien is the first person to catch Mandos by surprise since the beginning of the world.
Yeah. But so I mean, as a pure visual image, so like, the exposition-free way to convey, look, over there is where the elves are. We can even see elves in the background, right? Dead elves in the background. Like, this is the halls of Mandos where the elves abide. That's the door. That's the exit through which humans go. All humans go through the exit into we know not whither, right? That is, feels to me like a very effective way, to convey that the spirits of men go the elves know not whither and depart from Arda, whereas the elves remain in Arda. Yeah. Now, Steve's asking about Turin. I am not going there. Because first of all, look, we're not even going to do the Dagor Daggerath. Like, I'm sorry, that is not going to happen. Like, I'm back is the end of the film project, not the Dagor Daggerath. So we never have to answer the question of does Turambar come back to kill Morgoth at the end? And I mean, like, let's face it, the textual evidence for that in Tolkien is incredibly slim. I mean, that's like one version of one, which he wrote in the early 30s. So I don't feel wedded to that at all.
We can probably find a way to work it into a vision or a dream at some point in the Second Age in Numenor.
Oh, in Numenor, we're gonna come back to this for sure.
The solution to all problems is, so there was this dream, you see.
This is dream, absolutely, yeah. And we'll think of the number of dreams we'll have the opportunity to do in during the Second Age. So absolutely, yeah. No, but I agree. But I mean, you're certainly right, Marie, that if we're talking about the advanced course on human mortality, Numenor is going to be our opportunity for the advanced course on human mortality, right? So we can come back. We'll have plenty of time to come back. We don't have to solve all questions relating to human mortality. What we do need to establish, though, is the one-way door that humans go through, leaving Arda, and that elves don't. Because again, we cannot assume that our audience knows this fact about elves and men. And it's absolutely central to this season.
Like, the whole reason that Namo actually feels bad for Luthien is because of the eternal separation aspect.
Eternal separation, yes.
Of what she and Beren are looking at. Whereas if two humans die, they can both go through that doorway together.
And who knows what happens, but,
Good luck, guys.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, they take the risk of whatever's going to happen. I was kind of joking about The Bad Place, which is a reference to the show The Good Place, which ends kind of weirdly in my opinion. But the idea is that they have this doorway that leads into someplace they know not where, and they eventually choose to pass through that door.
Ilana was suggesting we show Feanor sulking in a corner. Yeah, for some reason I was imagining Feanor rattling the bars of his cage with a metal cup, but yeah, exactly. We could even bring in named folks again just to establish that the elves are there. Anyway, okay, so this is not getting us immediately and infinitely closer to the taking of Tulsirian in episode 1, but it's fine. It's fine. This is good, especially because it is also a mechanism for the introduction of necromancy, and not only that, but an explanation of how the necromantic opportunity arrived. So, Nick, I like the idea of an interview, right, between Sauron and a dead elf. Right, which, as you say, he would be able to perceive perfectly well, right? And yes, okay. So what he gets from them. So it is through this discussion that we learn about the uncertainty of the Noldor, the dead Noldor, right? Their trepidation, and he has his idea, right? He has his idea about how he can use this as a power source for him, right? This is what he sees. He sees the opportunity to use them as a power source, to harness them, to increase his own power, either directly or indirectly. And it is through the necromantic increase of his power, through his dominion of the elvish spirits, that he goes. Now, people were asking before, I think, how does he get from here to the Ring of Power thing, right? Well, we'll get there. But of course, we're setting up a deliberate irony. Sauron is going to end up, in fact, going down the same road that Morgoth went down, right? The point is, we don't want him doing that right away. because he has 25 years to get there, right? So it is true, by the time we get to the Second Age, his forging of the Ring of Power, that's the death knell for Sauron, right? That is the moment when he sets himself to go down, when he falls into the same trap that Morgoth fell into, right? He feels like he's got no choice. He feels like it's a gamble that's worth taking, because it's totally not like Morgoth, because he's still, I mean the only way it could go wrong is if he somehow lost his Ring of Power, which is like obviously totally not going to happen. So it's much this, there are reasons that we can establish when he does the Ring of Power why he's convinced himself that this is not just exactly the same thing that Morgoth did, except it totally is. In the end, that's absolutely what we see from Sauron. And Sauron in the Third Age, Sauron in the latter part of the Third Age, is absolutely in the place where Morgoth is going to get to by the end of the First Age. And that's going to be the sort of, in a sense, the real tragedy of Sauron's end, right? His overthrow at the end is like the denouement, right? When he becomes, the junior league version of what he was trying to avoid in the first place. That's the tragedy. That's the final, the final collapse of his character, the final end of his arc. So Angel, he's not recruiting the dead elves. He's dominating them. He is compelling them. Absolutely. That's what this would be. That's what necromancy would be. He's not going to play around with them, right? He's not going to bribe them. He's going to yes. He's going to enslave them. Exactly.
I wonder if their existence as homeless wraiths makes them more susceptible to the spell of not quite bottomless dread.
It absolutely makes them vulnerable. Tolkien was explicit that their remaining in Beleriand and their declining the invitation makes them vulnerable to the shadow. Absolutely. Even the Noldor who were themselves stubborn, right? Like corporeally, like Diriel, right? Those who were resistant, who did not succumb, whose wills remained strong in opposition despite slavery and imprisonment in Angband, after they're dead, they don't have much of the wherewithal to resist this. So we learn about this, the fates of the dead, their concern. We see the conversation can end with Sauron enslaving that elf, right? And increasing his own power. And so Nick, as far as the assembly line is concerned, right, the mass production, I would think we could cut, if we had a conversation between him and dead elf, who I ignore, possibly. Who else? What other candidates do we have?
The two named dead elves in Dorthonion are
Angrod and Angrod. Yeah.
There's some humans there, of course.
Right, but we don't want to touch that yet. They're not going to linger in the same way if they linger. Okay. So I don't know if it has to. I find myself reluctant to be to either one of them. It doesn't feel right.
It doesn't really need to be a named person. Because we kind of wanted to believe that those guys made it back.
Right.
They're the sons of Finarfin.
Yeah.
I could believe there's people among the elves of Dorthonion who might not want to go back.
Ooh. Nathan suggests Eol. Now we don't get the Noldor angle there, obviously.
Yeah,
But
and Eowl's not like he doesn't die on the fields of Dorthonion.
no, he
either.
doesn't. He doesn't. But we did dispose of him late in the season. But yeah, I mean,
No, we can't use Ale because the very first thing he would do is tell Sauron the location of Gondolin.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, is he an elf who would refuse, who has maybe some unfinished business to take care of and some gripes? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine Ale would not be among those who refused. I mean, if any elf spirit is going to be sulking in Middle Earth still, it's going to be Ale, right? Yeah, no, that's true.
Especially the Eowl that we've created, because he was.
Yeah.
We showed him in Quevian and resistant to the idea of being a thrall of the Valar. So
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
100% refused to go to Mandos.
Agreed. But yeah, I agree. He's too complicated to bring in for other reasons.
We can bring him in when Maeglin is tossed off the wall, and he can stand there at the foot of the wall
And
say,
die the
"Told you
same death
so."
as your father. Yeah.
Yeah, and he can say, "Told you so." So
Yeah.
the ghost of Ale saying, "Told you so." Totally
Right.
make that scene better.
Totally make that scene better. Yeah.
But I think that it's probably better to have a nameless elf there, because then we can show that same person at the gates of Minas Tirith,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And we can see the difference, like in their aspect, right? In their affect is probably
Yes.
more.
Yeah, but what I was starting to say before, though, was I think that we could cut. So, like, we have the conversation, Sauron whammies the elf ghost at the end, right? And then we cut from there to Sauron has army of dead elves. Like, time has passed, Sauron shows up with army of dead elves. Like, that presumably he's replicated this process. We don't have to show him replicating the process, right? I think that so long as sufficient time has passed that it doesn't look like he's done it in the last 15 minutes, I think that we can again, it doesn't have to be literally we cut to that in the next scene, but I don't think we need necessarily much more than that. As long as there is some passage of time. But we're going to need to go back to, we're going to need to end soon. Miles away from poor Thuringwethil as yet, but
Wait.
Yeah. Okay.
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 All right. This might be terrible. All right, hang on. So,
I can't wait.
in Minas Tirith,
Right.
taken over Minas Tirith, right?
Yeah.
In the very basement, right,
Right.
is a vat where Sauron keeps
We're
his
back to the evil
ghostly
vessel.
armies.
Right.
Right.
Ghostly
And
armies in
when
the bat.
when Luthien sings down the tower and breaks the spells which held it together, they're released.
She releases them
and
from bondage.
they
Yeah.
kill Thuringwethil.
Oh, whoa. Okay, I didn't see Thuringwethil coming into that bit there. The release from bondage of the elf spirits is lovely. That's lovely. I like that a lot. And it gets your tub of evil in there too. Yeah.
Not just a hat rack, my friend.
I like it. Now I'm not sure about the Thuringwethil angle. But we'll come back to that. We've got it because we can't figure out how Thuringwethil dies until we figure out what her story is, or where her story is going in this season. But
the idea of Sauron having a vulnerable object, which is the downfall of the object being associated with the tower
with his fall,
apart.
yeah,
and a tower coming down, like
a
a
tower
comes
crashing,
down.
yeah. There's
It's obviously not the same thing, but it would set
Right.
up a lot of things.
right. It rhymes. It rhymes.
It's backwards.
It is backwards. Yeah. Yes. Especially if it's... I do feel like an actual literal cauldron is a step too far. Because I'm trying to imagine and Sauron being like, and now I shall construct a very large pot, which shall enslave. Then shall be the pot of slavery to which I shall bind the elves. That seems a little bit odd. That he is that Mark One.
That he's brewing them.
Yeah. Exactly.
But if it's a vessel in which they're
or like a pit, that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That seems to me I'm imagining a pit with evil runes around it, right? It's the prison pit, right, for the elf spirits, and
we're gonna see this prison again because obviously Finrod and Beren are gonna be imprisoned there.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna be.
Could you imagine how mortified Finrod would be? Because those are his people.
Right.
If it's people from Dorthonion.
Right. True. There would be he. Wow.
It is a great way to explain why this army never shows up
again. Yeah. We wouldn't want it showing up again. And his, and by the way, I would also think we know, because Mirkwood, he's gonna have more goes at the necromancy thing. This is not his only shot at necromancy, right? But this is his best. I mean, this is the high water mark of Sauron's necromancy, I would say, right? Because of course he's going to move on from that. He's going to use that as, again, this is the alpha build, right? As JJ was saying, he's going to develop the ideas past that. Yeah. Steve, thanks. Where do the elf spirits go? To Mandos. They, having learned their lesson very soundly, upon being set free, they return to Mandos. We can even see some of them later. I mean, we can our new character, right?
Yes.
Dead Feanorian.
Yes.
We can see him again. Luthien can see him when we get back to Mandos.
Oh, so he's a Feanorian now, is he?
Oh, sorry. I think so.
He was Dorthonian 2 seconds ago.
Was he? Somebody said Feanorian, but I
Yeah, I understand the push to have people, but we don't need 40% of these people to refuse to go to Mandos. We need a couple of hundred people, and they just need to be at the forefront of the takeover of Minas Tirith, right?
Yeah.
They just need to create the terror and havoc, that Sauron was creating on the battlefield back in the Dagor Bragollach. They just need to be creating more of that.
And I love the idea that, and I'm going back to your other Minas Tirith suggestion, Nick. If the enemy that Anail lets into Minas Tirith is incorporeal. It's not that he opens the postern gate and lets orcs into Minas Tirith, right? Because that's too simple, right? If instead Minas Tirith is overthrown because the spirits of fear and terror rise up from within, the tower itself, and the elves, Orodreth's folks, his people. I mean, not his parents necessarily, but presumably. Anyway, Orodreth's, his folks have been through enough already. Never mind. I won't even think about Orodreth's parents in regard to the ghosts that take over Minas Tirith. So anyway, point is, because we decided that wasn't happening. The point is that as what we get is basically the defenders. Sauron's army is not enough to just conquer. He's not just going to sack, Minas Tirith. Nor is he just going to have it betrayed in a garden variety way. right? He is going to have these spirits of fear rising up from within the tower itself, and all of the defenders are terrified and don't know what to do, and they are confused and terrified, and many drop their weapons and run, and then Sauron's otherwise inadequate army can come in.
And it's important, like when it says that Luthien Luthien's song breaks the spells that are holding the tower up. Sauron didn't place those spells on that tower.
He didn't build it.
Finrod did.
Right.
So presumably, if it takes too long to get through the defenses of Minas Tirith, the elves could just let the tower fall down on its own, and then it's useless to him, right? And I forgot to bring this up again, but as the words we put in his mouth back in season 2 were, "Why destroy what you can cultivate?" Right. I have to give major props to Deadway.
Oh, Deadway, Deadway being the name of the elf, That's totally what we call him. Yeah,
that's tasty.
Deadway. Agreed. Yep. So, Deadway being our recurring minor character, we can have, and because we do need a face, right? We don't need a name, but we do need a face, right? We need a face for the trepid, the whole issue of the question of whether, the not choosing to go back to Mandos, right? We similarly need a face on the, because Steve's question was an excellent one, right? They already chose not to go to Mandos. What happens when they're set free? Well, we need to see them choosing, right? We need to give them that moment. We could even have, if we wanted it, we could even have communication between Finrod and them. In prison.
Maybe, right. Or at least some attempt at communication. But what I was thinking of, the scene at the end of the Scouring the Shire when Saruman dies.
Yes. Yeah.
And his
spirit rises up. Yeah.
Spirit rises up and it looks off to the west and then it gets blown away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen here. Right?
Right.
Because they look to the west.
They rise up and they look to the west.
And they're received.
Yeah, they're brought in. They're welcomed in. And we see them heading off into the light in the west.
Yeah.
Right. With the Hey. Phil could do a little elvish reprise of the song. Going off into the light in the west, right? Yeah, good. We get a little musical reference there. Anyway, okay, right. So they go off into the light, and then again, we could even meet him or see him a third time.
Yeah.
And again, he can be there when Luthien shows up. When we show Mandos, right? We can see that he's there in order to affirm the happy ending of the imprisoned necromantic
and
enslaved spirits.
Some act of gratitude, even
Right. Sure. Because he would know that it was Luthien who set him free, right?
Yeah.
Thuringwethil has seen the plans of the tower at Silmarillion. So, if there's anything specific about the spells that are binding the tower together, or that sort of thing, or if she needs Anile to create the slave pit in the basement or whatever,
right?
She intimately knows all the details of what that place is. So she could, having her be killed by the enslaved spirits at the end, if she was integral to getting them all locked up in that pit in the basement,
right,
it would be a just ending. Now, obviously, we don't know what we're doing with her yet. I know we're not talking about it, but I was trying to.
Yeah. No,
I
hear that.
Portray her. So her whole thing has been about information, right? Not torture.
She's been the spy.
Torture would be easy, but if she were what Sauron does at the beginning, where he grabs a hold of one of them and just sucks him for information. If she's doing that, a few times over the course of the season, then it becomes a fitting end and a consequence to the path that she's been on this whole time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Okay, hang on. I want to come back to I want to come back to the whole destruction of the tower thing, the whole key to the tower business, right? And I want to try to understand it from day one. That is to say, if this is a feature, right? Like when the tower was built, this was a feature. What was the point? Like, why have a self-destruct sequence built in to the tower? Like I've never totally understood that. Even like
it's the hymn ring thing all over again.
Right.
I think the tower's just unnaturally tall. Like it's not possible to actually build a tower this tall, and it's held together by the
by
will
power
of the builders.
Right. So it's not like they designed it to be a collapsible tower. It's just that it will collapse. If you kind of, again, like Barad-dûr, right? The will of Sauron is so again, Barad-dûr doesn't have a self-destruct sequence either. It's just that when the will of Sauron is removed, the foundations of the tower are removed and the tower collapses. So if the same thing were to be, in order for the same thing to be true, Sauron has to somehow acquire that. I mean, this is the part that I don't see how the transaction can work, right? If the will that is supporting the Tower of Minas Tirith is Finrod's will, then how does Sauron get it? And how can he have anything to do with it? Isn't it like, I mean, you can't exactly, that doesn't exactly come with the lease, right? I mean, when you take it over.
Yeah. I mean, the spells are ongoing though. You know, it's not like Finrod has to maintain concentration on the spell in order to maintain it, right? And if you push him off a cliff, he loses concentration and the spell breaks down. Right.
No, it's not like that. But if it's clearly linked to Sauron's will. I mean, Luthien forces him to review it. Like it seems to be transferable in some sense, or something like that. Right? I mean, that's the vague sense that I get. I mean, this, by the way, is never something I feel like I've ever fully understood in the Luthien story. Like
that. I mean, we've been focusing on Anile letting people in, as
right.
You know, and I think that's a good idea with the ghost aspect, but if what you really need to take over the tower is the secret code to the spell that's magically holding the tower together,
right?
That sounds like a piece of information that Thuringwethil should ferret out before Sauron
Could
tries
steal.
to attack this tower. Yeah.
Yes,
like,
for sure.
That is a piece of information that's needed.
Yeah. Yeah. But see, then it kind of feels like the nuclear launch codes.
Yeah.
Right? You know, that like, and I don't know. I mean, like
we don't want to remove it from Tolkien's intent of.
No, but I don't understand Tolkien's intent with it. That's my problem. Like, I don't get it. I've never really gotten this. Like, confession. I've never really gotten this. Like, what exactly does Luthien force out of Sauron when she's got him by the short hairs, and then she destroys the tower? She then takes what he gives her and destroys his tower with it, right?
Is it just an artifact of a version of the story in which the tower had never been Finrod's? In a version of the story where the tower was Thu's?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
I think so. I think that it collapses more like Barad-dûr. Not the same, because it's not upon his Sauron's destruction, but it's more like a Barad-dûr situation. Yeah. So, and that's it's exactly that. It's the supported by the will of the builder thing that I can't understand how that could be transferable. Right. I can't understand how that could be.
Unless he has to re-up it in some way, like
right. If the key to taking over that position and maintaining it as a strong position is for himself to, he knows that the will of Finrod is involved in the tower, and that if the Noldor are like, this is the problem with Tolsirion is it's a booby trap, in a sense, right? If the Noldor lose control over it, it's going to collapse and it's not going to do him any good. So it's a challenge Here's another problem to be solved by necromancy, potentially, right? The challenge is, how can you take over Tol Sirion and keep it up simultaneously? And the only answer is he's got to somehow subvert the power, the will that is supporting the tower, or replace it, right? With something. So, and so, Nick, I'm coming back to your pot of evil in the basement, right? If the pot of evil, because he's using spirits of the Noldor, right? These are Noldor spirits that he's got there, right? And so if he's kind of twisting, if one of the things that he's binding them to, they're supporting the tower by compulsion. You see what I mean?
So it's a pit. It's a pit.
It's a pit.
But it's surrounded by a metal ring with runes inscribed upon it.
Yeah.
That they are trapped within.
Yes.
And it's that power that he's kind of like drawing off of them is sustaining the tower.
It's sustaining the tower. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when Luthien destroys it, it breaks.
Tower's gone.
Yes, but it also breaks. It breaks that metal ring.
That's the mechanism for the destruction of the tower. Yeah.
Them. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. And so what he reveals to her is how to do that. Like, he reveals to her the power, like the song by which he is keeping them bound. We saw the way in which already Finrod in the rap battle, right? Finrod and Sauron are trying to like counter the spirits and ideas of each other's thoughts and songs within each other's songs, right? Luthien, what she gets from Sauron in this version, what Luthien would get from Sauron would be like what she doesn't know about necromancy. Nobody knows about the necromancy, right? I mean, there would have been stories from some of the survivors, right? In some, like they would, but they wouldn't have understood about the necromancy either, right? This is a new thing. Nobody knows this and how this works, right? But she would get this, not in the form of long exposition, from prostrate Sauron, right? And so she sings her song of, which again is like, remember, Finrod was already singing songs about, the chain that snaps and traps opening and that kind of thing, right? But he didn't really understand what the trap was that needed to be opened, right? She sees the trap. She understands, and so she opens the trap with her song. It's not just that her song is more powerful than Finrod's, like simply amped up higher, right? It's that she has the key. She knows what the trap is. She understands I get to say in a really hokey way, like the secret of his power that is at the heart of Tol Garhoth, and she opens the trap and releases she is the one who figures out its release from Mandos. Finrod's mistake is that he was trying to open the trap that he and Beren were in, right? She opens the trap that, Deadway is in, and that is what does the trick.
I'm trying to think of a way to make that exchange of information not feel super clunky, but we can work all that out.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements of this that need. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in smoothing this out and de-hokifying it in the places where it's still hokey. But as a concept, I'm still not 100% sure about the whole replacement of the previous will of the owners with the will of the enslaved Noldor is still a little hand-wavy, but
it's Indiana Jones swapping out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of exactly what Sauron did. Yeah.
Wait.
And there's a pit of souls in the basement. Yeah. So
did the elves down in Whoville have to sing a ritual song on a particular day in the room, in the chamber, which will eventually house the tub of evil? in order to sustain it. And Sauron just doesn't have time for that, so he creates the Tub of Evil instead. I still don't know how to get to Luthien from there, but like, is that a better transition? Maybe, like they had.
If
to
it's not the
sustain
will of the bill, if it's not Finrod's will solely, but this were shown to be, there was something, but it can't just be then. It can't simply be structural then, right? Because, I mean, what kind of crappy architectural plan is it to be like, we're going to build this tower, but this tower will spontaneously collapse if we cease singing every other Thursday, down in the basement. Like, as long as we do the little song ritual, we're okay. But other than that, everybody's screwed, right? I mean, that's a terrible design, right? So it can't be just that. There would have to be more. There would have to be some kind of power, like some kind of add-on that it gives them the tower. The tower's impregnable. I don't know. Like, you can't. No enemy can come in if you can. I don't know.
It's
something.
It's about sight. It's about because it's the Tower of Guard, right? And
right.
This is actually a reference to a line that was in the Dark of Bragalok script where mention is made of that there's very little that Orodreth does not see from his perch, right?
Right.
So the tower allows them to see unnaturally far.
So you're saying
the way that Manwë does.
So you're saying that Minas Tirith has a very tall tower, and in the top of which the Lord of the Tower can see things that are really far off. Is what you're saying?
Yes, but
that's
also
what you're saying.
Farther than he would, just because it's tall.
Of course. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. No. And he probably can't actually see the hand and mind of Feanor at work, but he can see pretty far. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm tracking with you here. Yes. And
we have to be a little careful not to make the magic too dependent
mechanical.
Right. Exactly.
But this is exactly...
If you do things in the right order, in the right way, then the magic happens is not how magic happens in Tolkien's work.
It is a good thing we're going to have an entire session in which we talk about how magic is going to be manifested in Season 6, because we've just, tripled the amount of... magic that is going to be appearing in Season 6. So that's really good. Well, no, we haven't. There's something going on with that tower. This is in the story. This is in the story. We're just trying to make sense of what's there and make it fit within, this story that we're telling. So, yeah. Okay. No. Right. So we'll iron that out there. That'll be a good opportunity for doing further work on exactly how this manifests.
Yeah.
We can put the Whoville / Pot of Evil conundrum into that episode. That'll be good.
Yes.
No, I like that. Okay, I think this is well. Okay, so looking back over our session this evening, that is, we've accomplished a lot, and it has included Sauron's step 1. We've accomplished that. We've accomplished necromancy and okay, let me take that back. That could be quoted out of context theoretically. Okay, right. So we figured out the necromancy.
We have not, in fact, actually accomplished necromancy in reality.
Disclaimer, no dead people were contacted during the making of this session. So anyway, okay. Right. Yeah, it's to our knowledge. Any dead people contacted during this session, where it was done accidentally, incidental, and it is not our fault. Okay, right. So good. Yeah, great. Excellent. So, no, we've accomplished a great deal. I don't like to think about exactly what percentage of what we set out to accomplish we have accomplished, but it is what we've done is excellent, and that's good. So what we still have to accomplish is Thuringwethil. But beyond that, what more of Sauron do we... Okay, no. The next thing that we need... we didn't get to discuss the issue of what the reign of Sauron is like. right? The beginning of the reign of Sauron. Sauron sets up on his own, right? We got to we've mostly gotten to his arrival in Tol Sirion. What we haven't got is what does it look like when he sets up there, nor have we decided why is he interfering himself in Northonian. And let me just throw this out there. I'm sorry. I'm going to apologize in advance to all the people who will hate this suggestion. And I'm not wedded to it. I just think it needs to be considered. What if he doesn't? What if Barahir's band is not Sauron? Just saying. Putting it on the table. It can be shoved off. Gorelim, I get it. Yeah, it does. I agree. Gorelim's... But it does. There doesn't... My immediate thought about Dorthonian is that this does not have to be a lone gunman situation, but we can sort it. We can sort it. But we do need to sort it. We need to sort the Dorthonian situation, right, and relate it to the Tol and Garahoth situation, right, in the overall what is Sauron doing and what is his plan and how is he moving forward deal, right? Then in that context, we need to talk about Thuringwethil and figure out what her role in Sauron's new plan, right? So we've got the Sauronic New Deal at the beginning of this season, right? He's doing his own thing. Where's Thuringwethil in that, right? What's her attitude towards it? What's her role in it? How does this work? And then that will then lead us to her perfectly just and wholly satisfying demise, and then Luthien looting her corpse. So we'll get there probably next time. So good. And I didn't even get to the part of Sauron's story that I don't like very much from this season, but we'll get there. Okay, good. So I think those are the things we want to focus on. The things that we want to focus on for next time, right? We want to focus on the rest of Sauron's plan, connecting the rest of Sauron's plan, what Sauron's rule is like, and his involvement in Dorthonian. Those are the two big questions for Sauron that we need to answer. And then Thuringwethil's involvement, and how does this then lead to her wholly satisfying and generally cheerful demise. Not her being cheerful. That is, us being cheerful about it. So I think that will be ample for us to discuss next time. And on the subject of next time, so the next time would be the 30th of December, but I'm not going to be able to be available that week. So I think we're going to have a little holiday hiatus briefly. So we'll just be off for the next time for the holidays. So we're going to plan to come back instead of in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks, on the 13th of January will be our next session, when we shall return to Sauron and Thuringwethil. But this was a really fun episode, guys. This is a lot of some challenging brainstorming happening here today, and some really interesting ideas. I did not see the introduction of the Hall of Mandos in episode 1 coming, but the more I've thought about that, the more perfect that seems with where we're going in this season. A much more satisfying frame of the season than merely Sauron trying to get his at last. So I think that's some excellent progress. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we will be back in 4 weeks where we will solve all of the rest of the problems about Sauron in season 6. Thanks, everybody. Have good holidays, everybody, and we will see you guys again in the new year. Good night now. I should say, before I go, almost forgot, thank you for listening, and Godspeed.